You're listening to Trevi Trav's Outpost, broadcasting to all remote jungle locations. Please remember to subscribe to both our YouTube and Instagram channels.
The sun was setting over Wenatchee Island, encasing the sky in shades of tangerine and rose. The sea breeze swept through the palms, carrying the salty smell of the ocean and the faint scent of exotic flowers. At the heart of the island, nestled in an overgrown valley, stood an abandoned Victorian-era greenhouse. It was a relic from a bygone time, shrouded in a thick curtain of vines and untamed foliage. The few inhabitants of Wenatchee spoke of the valley in hushed voices, warning of the dark spirits that dwelled within the greenhouse's glass walls. Dr. Isabella Rothwell, a strikingly beautiful and astute botanist, had come to Wenatchee Island for the week to study its unique flora for potential commercial ventures. One day, after eating lunch at a local pub, Isabella took an unfamiliar road back to her room at the inn. She drove past the overgrown field with the conservatory in the center.
A greenhouse?
She gasped. She gradually hit the brakes and looked for a safe spot to pull over. She got out of the car feeling tingly. There was a buzzing, something about it. She was drawn to the greenhouse by an inexplicable allure. Sure, the idea of perhaps discovering a new plant species this week excited her, but there was something deeper. A desperate voice in the back of her head that urged her to explore the contents of that greenhouse. She stood still at the side of the road, staring in awe at the old structure in the distance. Suddenly, a frightened crow fluttered out from a nearby shrub, calling in distress. Isabella snapped out of it. Lost in thought, she got back in her Jeep and drove off. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Isabella ventured back into the valley, this time on foot. As she approached the center of the field, she stared at the greenhouse's glass panes. Streaked with age, they reflected the fiery colors of the sunset and gave the structure an otherworldly glow. She stood in front of it. Breaking a few dried, tangled vines, she forced open a door. As she stepped inside, the air grew cold and damp, and the rich, earthy scent of soil filled her nostrils. Outside, a chorus of cicadas buzzed, but within there was only silence. The greenhouse was filled with plants of all kinds, many of which she had never seen before. Their leaves were an impossible green, their flowers vibrant and otherworldly. But as she moved deeper into the greenhouse, she began to notice strange things. Some plants seemed to move on their own, their tendrils almost reaching out like skeletal fingers. Others seemed to emit soft, ghostly frequencies that echoed in her ears. She couldn't understand how the plants could be thriving in an abandoned greenhouse with no apparent source of water. The curiosity gnawed at her, pulling her further into the depths of the glass structure. Isabella's attention was drawn to a particularly striking flower, a large crimson bloom with petals that seemed to pulse with the life of their own. She adjusted her glasses. Mesmerized, she reached out to touch it, and as her fingers brushed the petals, a sharp pain shot through her hand. She pulled back, startled, and saw a thin trickle of blood running down her finger. As the blood dripped onto the soil, the greenhouse seemed to come alive. The frequencies grew louder, forming words she could almost understand. The plants around her began to shudder and writhe, their movements synchronized like a sinister dance. Panic set in, and she tried to flee, but the vines had wrapped around her ankles, holding her in place.
Who are you?
Isabella cried out, her voice trembling. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was a woman, ethereal and beautiful, with eyes that glowed like embers. She moved with an unnatural grace, her long hair flowing around her like a dark halo.
I am Leora, the spirit of Wenatchee. You have awakened us with your blood. We have been waiting for someone like you.
Someone like me?
Someone who understands. Someone who loves the lives of plants as we do. Someone who will join us, love us.
The woman said, her voice soft and melodic. Isabella struggled against the vines, her heart pounding. Leora stepped closer, and Isabella felt the vines tight around her, pulling her down into the soil. Isabella screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the earth, the plants closing in around her, their leaves and petals melding against her skin, their roots entwining with her veins. Her vision blurred, and she felt herself being absorbed, becoming one with the violent plants. As the last light of day faded, the greenhouse stood silent once more, its plants vibrant and lush. The villagers would speak of Dr. Isabella Rothwell in modern-day ghost stories, another soul claimed by the haunting army of plants occupying the conservatory. But Isabella was not gone. She was there, her essence fused with the plants, her spirit alive within the crimson bloom. And every sunset, when the sky turned tangerine and rose, the strange tones would begin again, calling out for another curious soul to join them. From the shadows, Leora watched, her eyes glowing with satisfaction. She was not the spirit of the greenhouse. She was the master, the one who had bound the spirits of the island to the plants, feeding off their energy to sustain her eternal beauty. The ending was simple. See, the floral spirits weren't evil. They too were victims, trapped and manipulated by the true monster. Leora, the beautiful eternal woman who haunted the greenhouse, forever luring the unexpected into her trap. Since this story came to be, the greenhouse has long been torn down. The valley is now returned back to its natural organic state. But you can still go there. And to this day, if you know exactly where to look, in the spot where the haunted herbatorium once stood, you can still find small broken fragments of greenhouse glass hidden on the grassy ground.